two major threats facing the U.S., terrorism and recession. The country's top intelligence officials warn that al-Qaeda will attempt another attack against America within months, as the administration is under fire for its handling of terror suspects, making national security a top campaign issue this year. Our guest this morning, the president's top counterterrorism advisor, John Brennan.
Which is where we will begin our conversation this morning. And here now, the president's top counterterrorism advisor, John Brennan. Welcome back to Meet the Press, and thank you for braving the elements here to get here this morning.
Thank you, David.
Very serious topic to discuss this morning in terms of the al-Qaeda threat. The president was at the CIA, marking those who have fallen recently with the agency, and he spoke about the war in Afghanistan to hundreds of employees, urging them to complete the mission and win the war. How does he define winning?
The visit out to CIA headquarters was a poignant and somber reminder of exactly how determined the intelligence community, the U.S. government, is to destroy al-Qaeda. And as we move forward in Afghanistan and Pakistan and in other areas, we are determined to destroy al-Qaeda, the organization. They have used areas of Pakistan and Afghanistan to ply their trade, to train their operatives, and we are moving forward in cooperation with the Afghan and Pakistan government to take away that safe haven, to take away their ability to train those operatives to carry out attacks either there or here in the homeland.
We're up against a very difficult threat, as was underlined during testimony in front of the Intelligence Committee this week. This is a portion of that questioning.
What is the likelihood of another terrorist attempted attack on the U.S. homeland in the next 3 to 6 months? High or low? Director Blair?
An attempted attack, the priority is certain, I would say.
Mr. Panetta?
I would agree with that.
Mr. Mueller?
Agree.
General Burgess?
Yes, ma'am. Agree.
Mr. Dinger?
Yes.
First off, what can you say about the intelligence that's behind such a specific warning like that?
Ever since 9/11, al-Qaeda and bin Laden have been determined to follow through on its earlier attacks here in the homeland. We have disrupted numerous attempts to carry out those attacks here. They are continuing to train those operatives. They are using different areas of the world. We see most recently with Mr. Abdul Muttalib that Yemen has become an area where al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is attempting to launch those attacks. So the intelligence is strong that they are continuing to focus on the homeland, but at the same time, our counterterrorism successes take place every day. It shouldn't have come as a surprise to anybody that al-Qaeda is attempting to carry out an attack. They are continuing to have that as one of their priorities, but we've been able to thwart their plans.
And how do you win against a threat like this, when CIA Director Panetta was saying that al-Qaeda is adapting its methods in ways that are oftentimes very difficult to detect?
Well, we have to stay more than one step ahead of al-Qaeda, and I think we've been able to do that. We have increased our security capabilities across the board. We're working very closely with our partners. They are looking at new technologies. We are enhancing our screening procedures in the aviation sector as well as in other areas. So we are continuing to look at the types of developments and evolution that they are going through so that we can thwart those attacks, and we have been very, very successful.
Any credible threats against the Super Bowl today?
Not that I'm aware of. No, not at all. People are very comfortable with the security measures that are put in place for the Super Bowl.
What kinds of attacks is al-Qaeda now interested in pulling off?
Well, I think the Abdul Muttalib attempt is a reflection of just how difficult it has become for al-Qaeda to carry out attacks. He had an improvised explosive device in his underwear. He was trying to bring down that plane, but it was a faulty device, and it's because they're unable to carry out these large-scale attacks that they are now opting for individual operatives to carry out these smaller-scale attacks. They recognize that they are in need of some type of demonstration of their capability that they have not been able to show. Because of the tremendous work across the board, not just here in the United States between law enforcement and intelligence, but with our partners, with our Pakistani, Saudi, Yemeni partners. This is going well from my perspective in terms of continuing to keep the pressure on al-Qaeda.
How worried are you about sleeper cells in the United States trying to pull off lower level, what in the terrorist world they might call a single rather than a home run, whether it's attacking a shopping mall or this kind of attack?
That's why we have over 100 joint terrorism task forces that the FBI runs here throughout the United States to make sure that we have eyes and ears throughout this country in the event that there are some sleeper cells that are out there. Very close collaboration between the FBI and local law enforcement. We've been able to stop individuals. Najibullah Zazi, we had David Headley, we have other successes just over this past year. So sleeper cells is something we're concerned about, but we have dedicated a lot of resources to uncover them.
Let's talk about this political fight over national security as well. Scott Brown, now the 41st Republican senator, on the night he was of his victory, when he was celebrating, he said this about the approach that the administration has taken.
And the message we need to send in dealing with terrorists, our tax dollars should pay for weapons to stop them and not lawyers to defend them.
A lot of that criticism is about the handling of the Christmas Day bomber, Abdul Muttalib. Sorry, it's hard to get that name right. Why was he treated as an ordinary citizen for even the period of time that he was, providing some information, then getting a lawyer after he was given his Miranda rights?
He wasn't treated as an ordinary citizen. He was treated as a terrorist. He was immediately taken into custody. He was questioned under the public safety exception as far as Mirandizing an individual. FBI agents were there on the ground, as well as with Customs and Border Patrol agents. We reacted very well to that situation. He was then put into a process that has been the same process that we have used for every other terrorist who has been captured on our soil, whether they be U.S. citizens or non-U.S. citizens. Richard Reed, Ahmed Rizam, Almari, and others. They were brought into custody by law enforcement officials and then treated accordingly. So there was no distinction. And in fact, the FBI's guidelines that they used, the FBI Domestic Investigations and Operations Guide, was the implementation of the Attorney General guidelines that were finalized by Attorney General Casey in the last administration. In December of 2008, that is when those guidelines were put in place. So the procedures and the protocols were exactly consistent with what we've done before. Now, after this incident, the President asked us to take a new look and see whether or not those processes are ones that we are comfortable with and whether or not we can enhance and strengthen them. And that's what we're looking at right now. But those FBI agents and others acted appropriately. And quite frankly, I'm tiring of politicians using national security issues such as terrorism as a political football. They're going out there, they're unknowing of the facts, and they're making charges and allegations that are not anchored in reality.
Well, let's talk about one of those allegations. Senator Kit Bond saying that members of the Intelligence Committee were told not to talk at all about the fact that that he was now cooperating, that he was speaking to the FBI, and then it gets leaked out to the press after that, saying that the administration was responsible for leaking classified data that they were told to keep under wraps.
Again, inconsistent with the facts. Senator Bond and other senior members of Congress were briefed on Monday about Abdul Muttalib's cooperation. They were told about the fact of that cooperation as well as some information that he was sharing. During the subsequent day in the hearing, it unfortunately came out that that intelligence was starting to flow from Mr. Abdul Muttalib. The press was all on it. This network went out right away and reported that. And so we then wanted to make sure that we were able to provide to the networks and to the media the correct rendition of what happened and how instrumental Mr. Abdul Muttalib's family was in getting him to cooperate. And it was a very successful activity on the part of the FBI, Department of Justice, and others, including the intelligence community. So what we did was to make sure that the facts were out there as best they could be.
To those that say you have not shared enough information about how you intended to handle him, you say what?
I say that there are sensitive investigations and operations underway, and we're not going to compromise our ability to follow up on that information and to disrupt further terrorist attacks. And there have been instances when information has been shared with the Hill when we see it in the media the next day. And we have to be very circumspect as far as what information is going to be shared. The premium that this president puts on the work of the intelligence and law enforcement community is to disrupt future attacks and to protect the American people.
When you briefed some Republicans about how he was going to be treated, were they on board with the administration's decisions?
On Christmas night, I called a number of senior members of Congress. I spoke to Senators McConnell and Bond. I spoke to Representative Boehner and Hoekstra. I explained to them that he was in FBI custody, that Mr. Abdul Muttalib was in fact talking, that he was cooperating at that point. They knew that in FBI custody means that there's a process then you follow as far as Mirandizing and presenting him in front of a magistrate. None of those individuals raised any concerns with me at that point. They didn't say, is he going into military custody? Is he going to be Mirandized? They were very appreciative of the information. We told them we keep them informed, and that's what we did. So there's been quite a bit of an outcry after the fact where, again, I'm just very concerned on the behalf of the counterterrorism professionals throughout our government that politicians continue to make this a political football and are using it for whatever political or partisan purposes. Whether they be Democrats or Republicans. In the last administration, Democrats, I felt, were speaking incorrectly about the progress that we were making on the terrorism front. Same thing is true today. day. And I think those counterterrorism professionals deserve the support of our Congress, and rather than second-guessing what they're doing on the ground with a 500-mile screwdriver from Washington to Detroit, I think they have to have confidence in the knowledge and the experience of these counterterrorism professionals.